Welcome to today's Flux developer meeting. There isn't really an agenda except for things that Kingdom is filling out right now. So I guess we will just discuss them. Kingdom, you wanted to discuss the Flux bug scrub structure. Do you have a link to the document by any chance? Because I see a topic, but I don't have any context now about.
1 second. Yeah.
Yeah, take your time. I think in general, by the way, the bug scrub has been great. From my point of view, I've receiving notifications on things that I basically had forgotten about. So it works, I think. I haven't had time to properly look into how you are organizing it. What are your main let's do it differently because I don't have time to go through your document right now. What are your main concerns with how you're doing the meetings right now, or what do you feel could be improved, or are you seeing that there aren't many people joining and you would like to improve that? Like what kind of feedback are you looking for, or why?
So there's two things we know that we want to improve, and there's one thing, I guess, maybe two things that I have general questions about. So just to give you a quick 1 minute overview of what we're doing and how it works. There's a spreadsheet that gets regenerated every week, and if there are notes in the spreadsheet, they get carried over from one week to the next. So the notes are pretty minimal because usually if there's something to do, we want to note it on the pull request or on the issue itself so that there's not two sources and no one really has to look at this. But for the purpose of building up a mental model where I don't really want to spam issues, if there is nothing I can do, it's been very helpful to have this as a back channel so I can write some notes or make a little tick mark that says I've been to this issue once before so that we can avoid backtracking.
So can I paraphrase that bit?
Yep.
So you don't want to keep state in the spreadsheet itself, you just want to look at every time you go around, you want to observe the state of all the issues and PRs and then compile a status from that. Is this sounding familiar to anyone?
The general sense that I've had from working on lots of issues and lots of repos is that I will never have enough time to visit them all in one pass. And so I need a system for making sure that if I've already looked at an issue 1 week, I'm not going to really waste much time on that issue next week unless I had a reason to assign it to myself or something where there's reason to believe I should revisit that issue. So
and the problem is the spreadsheet probably doesn't grow well or scale well.
No, the spreadsheet works fine. So far, I haven't had any problem with the spreadsheet at all, except for two. One is it doesn't really cover discussions, which I would like to address, but there's no discussions API, so that makes it complicated. We'll either have to scrape the discussions or something else. And the other is that we'd really like it to be possible to do like an FAQ scrub where we actually revisit Slack threads and somehow act on those, whether they need to result in a new FAQ or again, it's about building up the mental model. So if we can get enough Slack threads ingested and the people who happen to be at the meeting remember those Slack threads already, we don't have to talk for them very long, and we can come up with some better action plan than adding another FAQ to the giant list of FAQs we already have.
Have you been talking with Allison?
Yeah, we had a good hour-long meeting, and Allison has a script to scrape Slack that we've looked at incorporating into this somehow. So those are two things we know we want to improve. Two other things are we would like to have more repeat visitors. generally two kind of things. One is trying to think of a good way to make people want to come back, and the other is actually to go out and survey the people who have been to Bug Scrub and see if there's some reason that they're not coming back, or is there's something that we could do, or maybe if we just contact them again, they'll say, oh yeah, I actually did mean to come back, and I'll see you next time. My next action item for today actually is to go through and compile a list of everyone who has been to a Bug Scrub, and just reach out to them personally to see if they would be willing to take a survey.
Are the Bug Scrubs added to the CNCF calendar?
They are. And
yeah, my guess is that the reason that most people, I mean, we have been doing this for a longer time now, but not for a really extensive time, is that people probably only have time once in a while to join and
I'm not
help.
taking it as a snub at all. I think that this is the vacation time of year. And
Yeah, that's also true.
An expectation that people will have been back at this point, but as a long-term goal, we do want to have repeat visitors, and it would be nice to grow it to the point where we have more people than we can coordinate in a single Slack room or a single Zoom room, and we need to grow to breakout rooms and have teams.
Would it be an idea to, for example, have a look with Allison to see how we can fit it into the contributor letter we have been working on, which was merged a while back? Because I think if we make it a growth kind of thing, so that you can grow into a community role, it may be much more attractive to people to continue to come back, because there is like a gamification of the work you're putting in. Not sure if it would work, but it could be an enabler for people to well, do more.
That's definitely one idea we've had, and another was to make it even more asynchronous and less meeting-like. Maybe we can't do them as frequently, but we make it a day-long event and coordinate through Slack. So we had lots of ideas for how to improve it. I did write this document up that kind of describes the structure right now, but not very well, I think. Those are really that's what I've got for the Bug Scrub.
So Kindle, I added an action item for you to look into the GraphQL API. So the GraphQL API does have access to the discussion stats, everything. You can get the whole discussion, do whatever you want with them. And I don't know how you can use GraphQL. It works for sure if you use the Go client of GitHub, but I'm not convinced it works for Python or whatever script you're using. So you have to.
It will work. You just have to get used to how GraphQL works.
I think that they were using GraphQL at my last job for so with Ruby. So I have people I can ask about that for sure.
Yeah, it's more about finding a client that doesn't use the HTTP API, uses the GraphQL API, and with that client you can definitely get all the stats that you want, the list, the number of replies, the last date it was replied, and so on. Because my understanding from the docs is that it gives you all the fields.
Great. Then that's better than what we have for Slack. It sounds like the Slack situation is very precarious. You have to have a logged in user, and you have to kind of go through their items. I haven't really looked at Allison's Python script, but it sounded like it was worse than scraping, whatever it was.
The nice thing about GraphQL is that you basically describe your read model you want, and then the API delivers it to you. So you're not working with with uniform responses with HTTP APIs most of the time, but instead you're more working like a query-like API thing.
Well, if I can get the date it was created and the date it was last responded, then that's
for
good.
sure.
Yeah.
fit into the model that I built. So
Yeah, the only thing that you have to worry about if you don't use a client, a GitHub client, is pagination, right? Because we have tons of discussions and it will give you only 10 or something. So you have to go through all the pages to fetch everything and then build your custom logic that, you know, lists them in a particular order or whatever.
cool. I'll check that out. That's probably enough about the bug scrub, unless anyone has anything else to add. Oh, as far as scheduling, I'm off Monday and Tuesday next week, but I think I'll be traveling on Wednesday, and Wednesday is the date of the bug scrub next week. So I was wondering if someone else wants to host it or if I should just cancel it. I might not need to cancel it. We'll be at a hotel in Indianapolis and I can host it from there and then travel back. It's only a 2-hour drive. So just to throw
Maybe
that.
talk to Alison, maybe she wants to take over. If not, cancel it. I mean, it's not okay to delay your whole trip because of this.
It sounded like it might fit into the schedule anyway, but I'll consider canceling it. And then the other topic I have on the agenda is related to Flux V1 stuff. We have a few people actively responding in the issue queue. The issues are mostly people who have run into a rate limiting situation, which is not unexpected at all. And I've developed a script that's pretty comprehensive and mostly in the FAQ that helps people understand why this is not getting better and that they will need to upgrade to Flux version 2. People are pretty receptive when you explain in enough detail, so it's good that there's lots of detail in the FAQ now. But we've also had some people who are using Amazon ECR who have found that the way, I think this is a common issue for anyone who's on EKS at this point, is based on the way that the access is limited to the metadata API. It doesn't work anymore unless you can specify a region and bypass the check, the OK to use ECR check. So that's the one outstanding issue that is slated to be released in Flux 1.23.2, I think. And I wrote on the PR for that since it's kind of a workaround that requires documentation, I think it maybe should be a minor release. And if it's a minor release, I don't know if I want to release it right away because there might be other stuff that should go in a minor release.
We need to do the release with the CRD bump because today is 121 release day. And 121 means Flux.
And that was 100% makes sense that we should coordinate with that. So that was the other thing I'm waiting for is when 1.22.0 Kubernetes comes out, it would be great to actually test it with the real release. But I've been testing against the release candidate 0 for a couple days now, and I found a few more things that should go in. So let's make it a minor release, I guess, and put it in there.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have to release Flux and Helm operator as soon as possible.
That's
Right?
already
Because this week we have 121, and that means if people do, I don't know, some automatically upgrades of their cluster, whoever does that anyway. If there is someone there that does that, Flux will fail.
Flux 123.0 and Helm Operator 1.4.0 are out that support the new Kubernetes release. I noticed that I didn't upgrade the client Go, but that was fine. But I have end-to-end test bumps that we can use to prove as soon as kind is ready with the new release that it works. But I've run the end-to-end locally and it all works, and it's
it should be fine.
We're
kind is a couple of days late because they have to build all the images for all the Arch versions and so on. So it's not going to be on the same day.
I can tell
they have become faster since.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's a couple of days delay.
Yeah.
Cert Manager and Ingress Nginx are not ready yet, I found. So we're ahead of the curve because Flux v1 is already ready.
Great.
So there's no immediacy on those releases, but if I know at least one person is waiting for that ECR thing, and if we wanted to just release it as a patch, it doesn't have any behavior change unless you have opted in by setting region.
If you can set something new, it should be minor. Not patch.
You're already able to set that. It just hasn't had the effect of enabling.
Oh,
So it's a bug fix.
it's a bug.
Bug fix. Okay, so we can release it as a patch then.
Yeah.
Okay. So even if you set the region, it will not take it into account. It will still call the metadata, and that's definitely a bug.
Okay. Cool. That will make someone very happy.
Yeah, on this topic, we need to figure out what to do with image automation controller. So there is a pull request around this image reflector controller, sorry, where by some flag you tell the controller to look at, to refresh the token on its own, like Flux1, and that region problem will definitely happen here as well. And now there are 3 types of authentication: classic, WAF 1, WAF 2.0, and they act totally different. In 2.0, I think the region metadata is automatically injected or something like that. So someone that has good knowledge of AWS APIs has to take a closer look at the PR147 in image reflector controller. For this,
yeah, not totally sure what to do about that PR, but I think possibly.
What was the number?
147.
It's quite specific to EKS in a way.
Yeah.
The reason being that the motivation for it was that the default behavior on EKS is that every pod gets access to the kind of the account's ECR repos, whereas that's not true if you're running anywhere else, or on EC2 in general.
That's not also true if you don't specify it in your EKS scuttle config. So if you don't add the ECR built-in policy that we wrote, which is our own thing that we said, okay, maybe this is a good way of offering people a shortcut to all these policies, and we call that the builder policy. And the builder policy gives you read-only access to ECR when you create a cluster. But this is not.
I thought it was something that was just default in EKS.
Maybe it's a default if you create it through the Lambda functions and all the AWS little UI they built to create the cluster outside the EKS scuttle. Okay. But with EKS scuttle, if you don't specify that policy, you don't have access to, to your ECR. You have access to the ECR where core DNS and other things are, but not to to your own stuff.
Yeah.
That can be in a different.
Yeah, so it's actually even more complicated than I thought. Great.
Yeah.
But the motivation is slightly different from how it works in Flux v1 because of that, because the sort of is motivated by the expected behavior of you can just access it magically rather than enabling that.
Yeah, but also EKS is moving away from these global roles, because, for example, when you create it with EKS scatter, you basically give that role to the node. So every kind of pod that spins there, it can do a ECR pull, and that's not what you really want. So what's happening now, Amazon and us with EKS scatter are also pushing for the IAM role to service account binding, right? Where instead of granting these roles, these policies on the nodes, you grant them on service accounts, right? With EKS scatter, you can pre-create the service account for you. So for example, it can create the image reflector controller service account before you run Flux Bootstrap. And when you run Flux Bootstrap will not override the service account because it's there. It will keep the annotation. And when the image reflector controller starts up, only image reflector controller has access, read access to ECR. And maybe the kubelet, but not other pods inside the cluster. Right? The kubelet needs to have access because it needs to pull it. But also only that pod, image reflector controller, only that one has access through the service account binding to the IAM role. And
yeah, okay. But if you, as you were saying before, if you go through the the clicking interface to create your cluster, then it won't have that stuff. Probably it'll be something else. And if they're moving away from just giving kind of having ambient authority, then
what I think this pull request will do will help a lot with the EKS scatter user experience, because in EKS scatter you'll say create this cluster, provision the service accounts for Flux, and here is also the Flux Bootstrap command that you have to run. In EKS scatter will create the cluster, then it will create all the service accounts for Flux, for example, link customized controller to KMS, link image reflector controller to ECR, all the stuff that we need. Then it will run Bootstrap, and Bootstrap will find those things there and it will work out of the box. So I think it has value from that perspective.
Yep, got it. And we can also give instructions for EKS for people who are not going that route and say, here's how to set Flux up so that it'll automatically get creds for stuff in ECR. That makes sense to me. And both those things need that flag, don't they, from the pull request? Yeah.
So once if we get the ECR pull request in, we should also do GCR and ACR.
Yeah.
Like we have for Flux One, we cannot say, hey, this is outside contributor. We don't care about any other clouds. Someone has to come and do it. Maybe we can ask people around that have experience with, I don't know, GCR and ACR to do the same stuff. I mean, copy pasting from Flux One and write tests for it or something. Because it's already there, right? Flux One has support for this other two.
Yeah, I mean, actually, this has less machinery than Flux v1, so it wasn't a copy paste, but it could be just about, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not for releasing an AWS only feature. That's my point.
Yeah, at least not without a plan to add the other things. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay.
One other thing I wanted to, not discuss, but tell you to be aware is that we are getting increasingly reports about source controller and image automation controller being stuck forever and not reconciling anything after they hit a timeout on the checkout. I don't know what's happening. I've asked around people not to restart Flux anymore, do the memory dump from our guide and give us a profile of the Go routines and of the memory. And this happens only on the latest release where we updated libgit 2. So my guess is there is some kind of memory leak or something like that. It runs, so it issues 1, 2, 3, 4 events of timeout, then it stops doing anything. It doesn't react to reconcile, writes nothing to logs, it's all dead. And somehow the health checks are responding. So the web server is okay, but our actual reconciler is dead.
I think that all connections just hang and the reconcile process never stops. And once the workers then all have a job that hangs, it will continue to stop doing things and it will endlessly hang in the reconcile method.
Because there is no context to libgit2, right? And there is no timeout. Basically, there is no thing that will kill that Go routine. So it will stay
I
there.
should be able to be the person.
TCP timeout, 30 minutes or something. If that.
30 minutes?
Oh, to pluck a number.
I have the source controller source open here next to my, wait, let me see, Git repository controller.
But yes, correct. libgit2 does not use context.
No, it ignores the context, it gets passed.
Yeah, there is no timeout here.
And there doesn't seem to be a timeout option on one of the structures either, from what I
No,
can
none of the
quickly...
C API has any kind of timeout stuff.
Mm.
You'd have to write that yourself. So none of it gets reflected in the Git bindings, the Go bindings.
So while it's doing the checkout, you have to manually check out this processing, and then if it hangs or something, you have to stop it yourself.
Could do that, yeah. I don't know how you cancel it. I guess maybe that's part of the callback. There is a callback progress, so maybe you could do that.
Yeah, you can configure a callback. Oh, yeah, you can do all sorts of callback configurations, and then for every step it does basically in the process, there is another callback method you can give to it. So then you would, okay, yeah.
Oh, damn. So there is a report on the image automation controller that after a couple of operation timeouts, it hangs, whatever. But now I'm also talking to another user, which doesn't use this image automation controller, uses source controller only with the defaults. So it's not libgit2, it's Go Git with GitHub. And after 2 timeouts, it happens the same stuff. Maybe it's something in our code.
I almost can't imagine what that would be.
But yeah, I don't know what state it hangs around.
Because if you do the Go Git thing, it's a really tiny wrapper to the Go Git, then it calls Go Git, and then it just waits till whatever error happens. So if there doesn't happen any error, then apparently within the Go Git thing, we either haven't configured some timeout, but I'm pretty sure we do, or something else is wonky.
Yeah, I mean,
I guess we have to simulate an operation timeout with our Git server, maybe.
Yeah, that's possible.
Yeah, but I'm wondering. It also depends on what part of the checkout it hangs, right? Like a checkout are multiple HTTP requests. So if it like simulating the right condition can be pretty hard. Like if it does a checkout, it first checks if the upstream is available to see if it can reach any Git metadata, and then it starts doing the checkout process for the individual reference you have given to it.
I don't think it gets to the checkout. So the error message is failed to connect to github.com, operation timeout. And to me, that sounds like a TCP TLS handshake or something.
And their server network is healthy. Because that's the other classic thing. People that have a wonky, I don't know, DNS server within their cluster or something that also shows up as a connection error, but then it's a third-party thing in your cluster that is actually giving issues.
No, so there are, I heard it from 3 separate people.
Okay.
The one I'm talking right now, it's on GKE public cluster. There is definitely no DNS issue there because they are using the Google DNS. And other people are reporting it on image automation controller. I'm guessing it's not GKE. It's a different setup. So I don't think it's a DNS problem this time.
If anyone wants to dive into it, the best way to test it now is to use the development branch from the source controller, which has split out tests for the Git repository reconciler, including a specific one for the whole checkout process against the upstream Git repository. So it should be easier than before to try it, the error, or mock the error response from the server or whatever, and see if it does weird things.
Yeah, I'm guessing we need to introduce a huge delay in our Git server at the first call to it. And that should give us fail to connect to that particular.
Yeah.
Oh, and one more thing, those are not SSH connections. So all this hanging is only over HTTPS. 3 people that reported, everybody was using HTTPS, not SSH.
Could it be the HTTP connection pooling?
And
that
yesterday
on connections that are failing to establish, and then there's no more to be given out. Just off the top of my head, that's my guess.
Oh, and this happened yesterday. Yesterday, GitHub had downtime, had issues. All the people saw operation timeout because GitHub was down. And then source controller and image automation controller, if they were using that, both froze. And yes, now I checked, everybody is on HTTPS. I don't know if maybe those that were using SSH didn't run into this issue at all. Maybe the SSH stuff didn't freeze. It's an HTTPS problem.
Yeah, so our best guess at the moment is HTTP connection handling. Probably.
Although, if people are experiencing it with libgit 2, then that does not use Go's connection pooling. Maybe it has its own.
So with both implementations, the people that are running on GKE, they use GoGit and GitHub, no libgit 2. And it happened for them in source control. So I can definitely say it's not a libgit 2 only issue because of that, because it happens the same thing. And source controller, if you tell it go git, it only uses go git. It doesn't mix the two in any way. So we definitely had that on go git, and we definitely have that on libgit 2 because it's also in image automation controller, and image automation controller only uses libgit 2 for cloning, right?
Cloning, that's right.
But then it becomes a really weird issue, actually, because I'm pretty sure that once you have chosen your strategy, it either picks the libgit 2 solution, which does literally almost nothing with Go, or you go with Go Git, which does everything with Go, but both have their own ways of dealing with SSL, with HTTPS, with all the things. So what is the common thing they have, or the thing they have in common then, that makes them both fail. Sounds like to me more like some side thing is causing issues than can be within our own code, but it's pretty.
Yeah, it's a really strange, strange
If
report.
if it's not like Go's connection pooling, maybe it's some sort of ulimit type thing.
Yeah, file descriptors maybe,
Yeah.
or something like that.
Very
That
low
was
level.
my idea also. It hit the file descriptor limit. It couldn't open any more sockets and everything froze. But
I mean, that might be very small for the pod, by default for a pod. So perhaps.
yes, in Alpine is very low, the file descriptor limit.
Right.
Yeah, it's we should also reply to this person here, an image automation controller, and ask him if he ever gets that again to run the profile dump. The other two persons that wrote me on Slack, I gave them the link and I explained them what to do. I have no other ideas, like getting the Go routine profile and getting the heap profile should give us some hints of what's going on. The Go routine profile should tell us if there are many Go routines stuck in network EO. They're waiting for a socket or something like that, I'm guessing.
Yep, you either see that or you'll see the one Go routine that's blocked on, pool.get or something, whatever it is.
Yeah, so
I had a question which I added to the agenda.
Yeah, sorry, Michael, go ahead.
Okay. So what's the GA bar now? Is it written
Depends
down?
on who you ask.
Oh, okay, all right.
For me, as a maintainer, I want my refactor efforts to have landed because they introduce some new condition types that make it easier to do certain observations. And for me, it's important that those are at least included in the GA because they touch major things. They don't touch the way the ready conditions at the moment work. So they are backwards compatible but they are in addition to it would feel really weird to introduce them in a 1.1 or something, if you get what I mean.
Okay. It standardizes the
the way it
GitOps
standardizes
toolkit
the way,
part, right?
Yeah, it standardizes the way that how the controllers emit events and what you basically can expect from any controller within the Flux project to do. And to me, that is a GA sign because it means that they have been aligned and that they are not as experimental anymore as that they used to be. And for me, that basically means that there are some rules you can rely on as an end user to be sure that if you have an expectation that something works like that for the source controller, that also has to work like that for the customized controller. So that's one of the things that for me is important to land before we declare GA. I think the impersonation feature doesn't have to be 100% complete, but it needs to at least be integrated into the API as a barebone kind of thing, because it's a major part of how we see role-based access control and stuff. And changing that past GA is also, you can do it, but I wouldn't.
If it involves breaking changes, you want to do those well before GA, I think is the point, isn't it?
Yeah. Those are basically the two uncertainties, or no, not uncertainties, but big changes ahead of us that need to land before we can say, hey, this is GA, because otherwise we are saying something is GA and then we are saying 2 months later, like, oh, but we made these big changes which you have to take into account, which I think isn't great the way of communicating or dealing with your community or your user base. It just
I have 3 things on my list for GA.
Okay, what are your things?
First is getting done the refactoring, conditions, events, logs.
Same thing as Hida said.
Yeah.
That's That's
Okay.
one, and I see them as serial, not something that you can do in parallel. So first we have to finish the refactoring and the uniformization of events, logs, and conditions everywhere. Second, implement the user impersonation under the user impersonation flag, like it is the proof of concept today in customized controller. That needs to be rewritten using the helpers that we have built in the first step when we did the refactoring.
You mean a proof of concept?
So no, the refactoring that we are doing today has a lot of implications on the proof of concept, because yeah, conditions will change, everything will change. We need to express the impersonation through conditions, through events, through logs in a
you basically what you're
can-
saying is we need to align the proof of concept that we have written so that it fits into the standards that have been laid out by the other efforts around conditions and stuff.
Yeah. So refactoring of what we have today, release that, then go back to the user impersonation proof of concept, refactor that using all the things that we have, extract the impersonation bits into Flux CD package, because we don't want to copy paste so much code from customized controller into Helm controller and back. Then do a release with the user impersonation flag, and that for me is sufficient for GA. Then we can think about strategies, okay, how we deprecate that, how we remove the service account and only leave principal in the APIs and so on. I don't think these should be blockers for GA if we actually have the whole implementation after a feature flag, and it's part of our conformance test, it's part of our end-to-end tests and so on. And the third thing on my list as a requirement for GA is fixing the image automation user experience by implementing access control, the access control list at the source level, like I've proposed in that pull request, and you both of you agreed that approach. And
You mean the granting access to namespaces?
The service access list on the Git repo, where you say who can access me, that namespace can access me, or maybe that object that has that label can access me, right? So on the other side, you can use in your image automation APIs, you can specify a namespace for the source, then the image automation controller fetches the source, checks that the access control is right, applies to it. The thing that it reconciles is in the namespace that fits the access role, or it has a label that fits the access role. And if it doesn't, it rejects the object or not. And this will also happen with customized controller, Helm controller, and other things that are referring to sources, and normalize that under the access control list.
Does it also include, like, we've had a lot of requests about cross namespace resources, referring to cross namespace resources? Is that something we want to reevaluate before we reach GA? Because we literally get those questions every week, I think, for some.
Like the amount of people asking me why it's image automation like that, I stop responding.
Yeah, but it's not just image automation. It's also people wanting to revert to secrets in other namespaces when they use those from. Basically, people want to break out of the namespace boundary that has been set up by Kubernetes, and they're expecting us to make that happen.
Yeah, other projects are going into that direction. So if you look at the latest Contour release, you'll see that they promoted the secret cross namespace sharing for TLS certificates.
And how do they deal with the distribution then? Are they applying a model, but because that's one of the, I think that's maybe from the Contour project. There's one model where you have a secret and it basically gets over to any namespace that makes a request for that secret. And there's a model where your client simply has access to the namespace and gets the secret directly from that namespace. Do you by any chance know what strategy they apply?
like in Ingress v2, you basically have a selector for which other objects can use that particular secret. You say, oh, this certificate is a wildcard cert, and I want it to be used on those 3 namespaces because there are the apps that use this shared cert. And the cert is not placed in 3 namespaces, is not refreshed with let's encrypt 3 times. That will not even work. The certificate has to be only once refreshed and so on. And with the image automation is quite the same because you have to refresh the pull secret every time. So it's very similar to the TLS secret, the image pull secret, right? It expires, someone has to refresh it, someone has to maintain it, and if you don't want to do that in 100 namespaces, if you have that.
No, but that's one of the
That's not a Git repository though. So how would you manage that? In the sense of, and therefore is not subject to the access control thing that you were talking about.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can. The way I'm seeing it, people what were asking is, hey, I want to put the image registry object next to in the namespace where the secret is. But in that namespace, I cannot put a Git pull secret with write access because that namespace is a tenant, team namespace or whatever, and they shouldn't have access to this repo right directly there because whatever, security, right? So at least with the access control, we give them this solution where they can place the objects next to the app and refer to the Git secret. Now, of course, many of them are asking the other way around. Hey, I want to keep all these things here, but I don't want to create the pull secrets in the Flux system namespace. I want to pull them from this. I have no answer for that today because we don't manage that secret. It's not ours. So that's so strange. But from this side, between our objects, we can have this access control list that allows them to trim down the duplication of what they have to do today.
It's people have at least 2 varieties of that, don't they? That use case. One is I want to let people have automation, but I don't want to give them just the secret to write to the Git repository directly.
Yes.
And then another one is kind of the same thing, but for image pull secrets, as in I want them to define the policies, but I get to define the automation maybe, and keep the secrets to myself.
Yeah.
And that one isn't covered by source access lists, and is, I mean, it may be, I did a big summary of these things. I may not have covered all the things, but
there's another one for source control and Helm controller users, and that's where they have to always put their Helm repository declaration in multiple namespaces, which is a very cumbersome task. And the reason I would like to solve it using a non-namespaced Helm repository object, but the problem is that you then can't refer to a secret and you can no longer have an authenticated global. It's like this major flaw in you need the secret design, which I don't have an answer for yet.
Yeah, I mean, you almost have to sort of do it in 2 steps and have something that is in a namespace and does own a secret, and then you grant access to the global thing, if you see what I mean. Or you have some sort of, you separate the access, which can be cluster level or namespace, from the actual thing itself.
Yeah, you mean like a request basis thing?
Yeah, a bit like,
which is kind of used
a claim or a grant or a request or something along those lines. But it's awkward. I mean, Kubernetes just makes this awkward. Namespaces make a lot of sense until you are a sort of service provider yourself.
Yeah, once you're on a
then
higher
it
level,
becomes
yeah.
very difficult. Especially if you're doing things that affect the cluster. Like if you're sort of self-referential, then it's not very well defined. Anyway, awkward.
Yeah, one last thing. Do we want to
it.
make a Flux 2 release?
Like now or soon or something? Or...
Soon we have CVs all over the place again, Alpine.
I think I need to backport the bug fix to the source controller from the development branch first before the source controller can be released.
No, I was suggesting to do a release without any refactoring bits. For example, customized controller and helm controller should be released with the patch where you can create kubeconfigs that are compatible with SOPs decryption. Because we tested only cluster API, we didn't realize, I didn't realize that the kubeconfig that cluster API creates is not compatible with SOPs because it doesn't have the file type in the key value. It's value, is not value.yaml, so SOPs will do the binary decryption, and that's not what you want. You want YAML decryption because that's a YAML. So that's an easy change. I did it today in customized controller. I can do it in helm controller. So those two can be released for those that are using multi-cluster deployments from a central cluster, but without cluster API. And when you don't use cluster API, those kubeconfigs will sit in your Git repo. They will be encrypted. And yeah, right now you cannot decrypt them. And maybe source and the image ones, we can bump some packages and do the release. For example, there is a new Kubernetes 120.3. Maybe we can bump that and do a release for everything, so we get rid of CVs. I don't know, it's just a suggestion.
It sounds good, but you shouldn't take my opinion as the final word, because I will probably not myself be able to do it as I'm distracted by lots of other things at present.
So Hide?
I missed part of your thing because I got a phone call which I had to ignore, but then it got
So
Stefan, what Stefan was saying,
distracted. What Stefan was saying at the beginning. I missed like the middle part of the thing.
So is it worth it to spend you and me half a day to do a release of every single controller and then Flux to fix the CVs and ship some small fixes like the SOPs fix and other package bumps? Or leave it like this, CVs bit, people should rebuild their own images of Flux and we'll release it in a month or two and when the whole refactoring is done.
For the source controller, there's one major bug that people can profit of, but all the security patches thus far are basically, they don't have an attack surface or nothing. It's just that the CV pops up, but there isn't really anything interesting you can do with it. One of the PRs that comes to mind is that the paths for buckets weren't taken into account properly. So if, for example, the structure of your bucket changed, then in some cases the change wasn't properly detected. Yeah, but then while I was working on the refactor, I figured that if you have files that have certain metadata attached to it, for example, access timestamps or other things and dates, we don't strip them from the archive, so they can produce different checksums while we're only focused on the content. So if we do a release, I would backport that from the development branch I've been working on so that the fix becomes better. You get what I mean? So that would be required then. But yeah, I think it's nice for people to do. If it's the best for us time-wise, I'm not so sure. But on the other hand, you don't want people to have the idea that their whole project has stalled while we are busy doing important things. But yeah, let's do it. I mean, there hasn't been released for a couple of weeks now because we all have been on vacation and stuff. So it is at least a nice gesture to show that we are still actively releasing patches while working on bigger things.
So yeah, tomorrow then. I don't want to do it on Friday.
Tomorrow is fine with me. I will do the patch. I will do the backporting of the patch then in the morning, tomorrow morning. Once that is merged, we can do the source controller release cycle, and then we can do all the other things right afterwards.
Cool. Okay.
I could have a quick approval on the Flux release I posted in the chat. That would be great from anybody.
How many lines of code is it?
It's one PR. There's nothing really that's changed other than
It's headlines, no problem.
single bug. And the chart also, there's a chart PR that's already open. I'll do the rebase and update the changelog. They'll have stale dates, but they'll get fixed.
Cool.
Got to go prepare for another thing. Okay, I'm going to stop recording. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
And till next week.